Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Energy to Heal podcast. My name is Laura, and I'm here with Sarah Thiessen. If you have been here with us for an amount of time, you are getting familiar with her by now. Sarah is the founder of Splankna and a therapist herself, and has been on before telling the origin story of Splankna. And today we are talking about every question that I've ever wanted to ask about Splankna and all the frequently asked questions by clients that I meet with regularly I'm finding myself answering these questions often for people. And I want to give you guys an opportunity to hear it from Sarah herself. So thanks for being here, Sarah.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so I understand that some people have been here for a long time, and some people, this could be their very first episode that they've ever listened to. Can you just give us a recap of what we're talking about? What is Splankna? How do you explain it to people, especially when people are meeting you for the first time in just the real world, and they're like, oh, what do you do for a living? What is your answer for people?
Oh, yes, the elevator spiel, right? So Splankna is a biblically based mind-body protocol for inner healing. That is the shortest way you could possibly say it.
All right. So you
So
practitioners out there, you can memorize that sentence right there.
yeah, that's right. It is a biblically based mind body protocol for inner healing. So what Splankna is it is a way to bring our emotional symptoms before the Lord, to ask Him to search through the body that holds all the record of a person's life experience, and to find for us the ground zero moment behind an emotional symptom. And then one by one, emotion by emotion, we find and release out of the body down at that frequency level each of those trauma emotions that were felt around a moment in time. And then we ascertain together what kind of agreement was made to try to cope with that moment. So that might be something as simple as a lie that we believed, all the way up to, on a subconscious level, we actually do buy into symptoms for perceived secondary gain benefits of different kinds. And
Mhm.
we break agreement with those things. We see them as offered from the enemy in our moments of vulnerability. So we break those by the authority of Jesus in prayer again. And by doing so, what I just described there, we attend all together at once to the body, the soul, and the spirit in order to get really underneath the very root of an emotional issue and release it out of the system.
Very good. I can tell that's not the first time you've said that. I love how fluently you say that. And I laugh because I meet with people, it's their first Splankna session, and they sit down and I'm getting ready to tell them what we're going to be doing. And then a lot of times at the end, I'm like, and if really none of that made any sense to you, it's okay. It makes a lot more sense when you just do your first session.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like you can kind of wrap your head around it a tiny bit, but really you kind of just got to experience it to see what it's all about.
Yeah. It's definitely different. That's for sure.
Can you go into what Splankna means? I get that question a lot.
Oh yeah, a splankna is so slight little bit of background to that. So in my undergraduate degree is in Bible, and so one of the requirements for a Bible degree is that you have to take Greek, because the New Testament was originally written in Koine Greek. So in the Greek class, Dr. Gear was our professor back in the day at Abilene Christian University, where I got that degree, and he was talking one day about this word splankna, and he was just sort of extrapolating about what an interesting word it is and how it was used in first century culture. So he was saying this word splankna literally means bowels, or like your large intestine. it means bowels or guts, like that,
Gut, yeah.
the gut. And he was saying that at the time, when the Bible was written, that word was used figuratively a lot, the way we use the word subconscious or intuition, how we would say something like gut sense, that
Hmm.
kind of thing. And And I just thought that was interesting. And so years and years later, I didn't, when he was talking about that word splankna at the time, I didn't even know yet that I was going to be going into psych at all, much less going to be developing splankna and what it has come to be. So years and years later, when it was developed and it was time that it needed to be given some sort of a name, I thought it might not be an accident that one of the only Greek words I remembered from college was splankna.
One of the only, yeah. Yeah.
And I
Okay.
remember saying to Todd Clary at the time, who was in the conversation with me, trying to come up with what a name would be, saying, "Well, we can't call it Splankna. Like that's the worst word on the planet. I mean, what are you gonna? What are people gonna say? Oh, I do Splankna," and we laughed, And he was like, actually,
Little do we know.
yeah. So yeah, worst word ever from a PR perspective. I am well aware. Yeah.
So, okay, what do you tell people when people say, "What do you do for a living?" And I know you're like the founder, but like I want to hear your actual answer and then I want to hear like if you weren't going to tell people you're the founder, you just are a Splankna practitioner. Because sometimes I'm like, when people ask me that, I'm like, okay, are you like just trying to make small talk? Because if you are, I'm just going to say like, I work in trauma therapy and I'm just going to leave
Right.
it at that.
Right.
Or do you like actually want to know, in which case that's a whole
Right.
conversation.
Well, that's actually what I was going to say. I said, well, I my answer to that depends on the context. If it's, if it's one of those things where it's, hey, stand up at church and greet your neighbor around you and tell them what you do for a living. Well, I'm not going to get into a 20-minute discussion of Splankna,
Yeah.
right? So I would say I'm in psychology or I'm a therapist. I might say that. So it depends, on how much they want to know. If they really want to know, I would say what I just said to you. I would say I developed, I would say, but what you would say as a practitioner is I do a mind body protocol for inner healing.
Okay,
That's
simple.
what you would say. Yeah. And if they're curious and they go, "Oh yeah, what's that? What do you mean?" Then of course you can start getting more into the weeds if they want to know.
Yeah, and if they're just look at you and say, "Okay," and they move on, you
Okay,
know that you don't need to
bye-bye.
unpack that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the other thing I was gonna ask you is what do you say to people who they know a little bit about Splankna or they feel like they understand it, but they are super skeptical, especially from the like perspective of I don't know what else to call it besides like they just feel like it's woo woo. Like it's just like it doesn't actually work. It's just placebo effect. It's not real. It's not based in anything. And they were like really wanting to understand. They're skeptical, but they really do want to hear. Like, can you tell me why this is real?
Yeah. Well, so scripture says we know a thing by hearing, right? It says that even when we're talking about the gospel itself. And so the stories are always a really great place to help a person build a little bit of hope and a little bit of anticipation that maybe this could be useful for them. So stories is a great place to start. Telling
Mm,
a person the stories of your own experience as a practitioner, the lives that you have seen change. That is a great place to start. When it comes to somebody who's really science minded, I find that rather than trying to convince them, sometimes it actually is more supportive just to be undefensive about admitting the fact that scientifically there is a great deal of mystery
mm,
involved in what the mechanisms are in the kind of work that we do there, and admitting that and being non-defensive, not trying to quote prove it. And I remember when I first described the whole thing at length to who would become my husband, he listened quietly to the whole long description, and he said at the end, well, he said some other funny things, but the thing he said about this was, he said, "This might work for different reasons than you think."
mm.
And I said, "That's true. It really might. We aren't sure what the mechanisms are. We can see the result and the fruit that is reliable, and it isn't perfect, of course, but it is certainly reliable enough to be worth doing again." And so, but we don't really know exactly for sure. We can't prove in traditional senses what the mechanisms are or why it works as well as it does.
Yeah, and I've told you this before. It's like I've been, I think, doing this for maybe 3.5 years, and I just thought after 3 years I would have a better grasp on the scientific side of this.
Mm,
And I really enjoy reading through the book list that you give in training
mhm.
from a scientific standpoint. And I have come a long way in understanding how and why this works, but I still feel like I just don't really know. And I'm kind of letting go of the need to know after a while. It's like, I don't really know, but I just know that the fruit is consistent. And I
Mhm.
know that as a practitioner, my books are full and people are wanting to come back. And it's because it's helping them.
Yeah.
And the more I do it, I'm like, that's really all that matters. I know it's in
Yeah.
submission to Christ, and I know it is helping set people free. And it's
Right.
cool and fun to learn the scientific side of it, but I'm embracing the mystery.
But the greatest minds out there, there's the whole field of the folks who work in subatomic and quantum mechanics. They don't know either. The
Mm.
whole field is full of mystery. It's a nobody has this thing nailed down. So the whole concept that Splankna is coming from, the assumption that a thought, a memory, an emotion has some kind of a frequency or a substance to it that is stored in the body, that is the quantum mechanics side. And even the greatest minds there are still in more mystery than clarity.
Yeah, it's like the quantum field is not up for debate. Everybody knows it exists, but the way it works and the rules it follows are the mystery, right?
Right, right. And there's even mystery and disagreement in how true or not true it is to even think of an emotion as having a frequency. Even that part is debated in higher minds than mine, you know. So,
Yeah.
but again, the I didn't come up with this idea. I discovered, was shown this by other practitioners who were doing work at with coming from these sorts of assumptions. So the development of Splankna, when I put together what we're doing here today, it was drawing from several different sources and different guesses about mechanism, where there was fruit that was obvious, that was consistent. And I was just trying to say, okay, since there's some kind of mechanism here that's effective, let's see as much change as we can with people's hearts, with people's lives and their relationships, and sometimes even bodies. Let's see as much change as we can. And my challenge back then was not really to try and nail down quantum mechanics. That would have been way past my capacity. My challenge was to say, okay, how does someone who is devoted to a biblical worldview, how would you separate out mechanism from false conclusion, false religion that's so mixed in to so much of the origins of this kind of work? So I was
Yeah.
way more focused on the theological challenge than I was on the debate of quantum mechanics.
Yeah, because that adds to the mystery. It's like we're working with something that involves quantum mechanics,
Hmm.
and we're working with people on a spiritual level,
Hmm.
which is like spiritual freedom. There's mystery in that too. So,
Of course,
what I
yeah.
love about that is like it really, as the practitioner, it forces you to come and surrender to Christ and be like, listen, I don't know how to heal anybody. I am not the healer. I don't have to know. I am just coming and following this, using this tool and following Jesus. And it is amazing what comes up in these sessions.
Right, right. And even when you're a very accomplished, seasoned Splunk practitioner, where you really are very skilled at Splankna's specific kind of steps and the different interventions, you still, every single time a new person shows up, you still don't know what they need.
Right.
Because the steps, yes, there is fruitfulness in those steps, but each person presents a completely different, not only a completely different life experience, but a completely unique way that they responded and adapted in healthy and unhealthy ways to what they've experienced. And every single time, it is only the Spirit of a living God that has the power to search through all those details and find the spot. Only the living God knows how this one person is knit together and how their experience plus responses have made them into who they are today.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember doing a session with somebody, and it wasn't a healing side of the chart that came up, it was a creative side.
Hmm.
And I remember just kind of thinking, like, oh, bummer. because I just had it in my head that the healing stuff is like where the juicy stuff is.
I know
And the
exactly what you
creative,
mean.
yeah, the creative is just like, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll do a creative. It's not as powerful, but we'll do it. But we did this thing and I'm like, I'm like, okay, here we go. We'll do creative. And all of a sudden this client, like big, strong military guy, gets out of his chair and basically like on his knees weeping before the Lord. And I'm like, I don't actually know what's happening here. So I just like sat quietly and gave him, and it was like the Holy Spirit and him had a moment. I had no part in it. The Lord was speaking to him. He was weeping. It's almost like you could just see things breaking off of him. And he was like that. Like, I mean, once it was all, his whole session was done, he got up and he was like, I feel so free. And I'm sitting there going, I don't even know what just happened. I still don't know what happened. It changed my perspective on creatives. And it really just taught me like, Laura, this is not, you don't have to mentally know what's going on. This is you facilitating something between the client and the Lord.
Yeah, and that surrender piece you said, that is so, so centrally true to the Splankna process. The practitioner, you're so right, is required a depth and a thoroughness of surrender and willingness to follow into places that, like you said, don't make sense necessarily, at least initially don't make sense, or aren't where you thought for sure this person would need to go. That happens all the time. For instance, someone will
Mhm.
come in. I have been working with people for since 1993. So a
Wow.
long time, nearly 30 years.
Wow.
And when you have worked with people that long, you do get accustomed to typical patterns, you know? So like there are times now when a person will come in and they will describe a scenario and my brain, my conscious human logic, right, will say,
Yeah.
oh, I got that. That's going to
Yeah.
be blah, 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 right?
I bet you
Like,
made an agreement about loneliness.
right, right.
Yeah.
Oh, I can totally tell what this is going to be because I've heard this story,
Yes.
40 times in the last 30 years, right? Well, and then we'll go into the work and I will be led by the Spirit to go into a completely illogical place as far as I would surmise. I'm like, we're doing what? What are we how? And
Yeah.
then but the person changes and gets their freedom and I'm like, see, what do I know?
Yeah.
We gotta always be following. It's one of those central values of the Spartan protocol.
Yeah, one of my favorite things that I have noticed in myself since I've become a practitioner, and it's so funny because I feel like compared to what I used to be when I first started, I'm like, hey, I'm 3 years in, I'm getting this down pat, and you're like, I've been doing this for 30 years. Like, yeah, I'm a newborn practitioner, but even in those 3 years, I have noticed just my ability to hear from the Lord has sharpened, honed in, because I'm sitting hour after hour after hour with these clients. It's almost practice. I mean, it is. It's practicing. And I've learned to say out loud the thing that comes to my mind. Okay, so for instance, I had a client come and we were trying to get her to tap into this creative emotion, creative again. And she said, I can't feel this feeling of like safe and secure. I don't
Mm.
know how to imagine it. I don't know how to bring that up. It's just not a common feeling for me. I can't get there. And so I was praying and I got this picture of her sitting underneath a stairwell and feeling like this is her little sanctuary as a little girl, like the little girl version of her. And so I said, I want you to imagine that there's this place when you were this age, because we were working on age 9. I want you to imagine that there was this place when you were 9 that you could go to where you felt like none of the pain of your family life could touch you. It was like secure and almost just hidden away, and you could get reprieve there. And she said, oh, I have something like that. When I was a little girl, I used to go under the stairs and it felt like nobody could find me there and everything was safe. And I just was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I was picturing. It was you hiding under the stairs, feeling tucked away from the whole world. And I almost had said stairs to her specifically, but I was like, no, I made that up. you know.
Uh-huh.
But as soon as I said it to her and she goes, "Oh yeah, it was the stairs." It was like the Lord being like, "Laura, trust when I have these pictures pop up in your mind. Trust them."
Right. Which is exactly why we start advanced training with the exercise that we do, where we are in groups of three and we lay hands and just offer whatever comes, because I'm trying to start that process in you that you just described. I love hearing that from you just as a practitioner, that your willingness to offer what comes and not censor it is getting stronger, and
Yeah.
you're trusting it more. That's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, yeah, it changes my whole life with the Lord, my own prayer life, just me by myself. Like, just becoming a practitioner has opened my eyes to the Lord in such an exciting way. Like, if anyone's listening to this and you've ever wondered, like, if it would be something you'd ever be interested in doing, I just can't recommend it enough. It is so cool to watch the Lord work in other people's lives, and it will make the Bible and the Lord come alive to you in a way that you probably haven't experienced before. So, on that note, I was going to ask you, this is kind of a funny question, but are there people that you would recommend they don't become a practitioner? Like, they're not ready? How does someone know when they are ready? You know, what do you look
Yeah.
for when you're like, "You know what? This could be a really good thing for you."
Yeah. Well, so general maturity, it would be harder. There would be more pitfalls for a brand new believer. We do talk a lot in advanced training again about the whole, when Paul's discussing meat sacrificed to idols in the New Testament, and when he's giving that whole long description about how there's a there are things that the stronger brother can tolerate and not be triggered by, not have his conscience pricked. There are things that the weaker or younger brother is not able to tolerate, and that we need to protect that and honor that. So especially if you had somebody who was a new believer who had just come out of any kind of new age or witchcraft, Wicca, somebody who was real universalist, that kind of thing. For people who have, especially people who have had any sort of practices in their life that were real in the new age camp, it would be too difficult for them not to see Splankna's worldview and steps as being too overlapped with their old life, what they were repenting of. If I had somebody who came, and actually would not just say that for a practitioner, but even for a client. If I had a client who came who was brand new to Jesus, fresh out of Wicca, let's say, I would say Splankna is probably not the best fit for you right now. You need some good old fashioned discipleship. You need to really get
Mm,
grounded in the word. You need to get grounded you need to have the renewing of your mind that goes on for a while before you would be able to work with tools like this and not see them as an endorsement of the old things you repented of.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. What about someone who is not new to the faith? They've been a Christian a long time, but they haven't walked through a lot of their own healing as far as like, hard childhood or an
Yeah.
abusive marriage.
Yeah, that's a harder one. That's not as black and white, actually, because the Lord really enjoys healing us through each other. And so we have seen more than once people who come who really have and they really need to do their own healing work, who have been able to do those things together, to work on themselves, get their own stuff addressed through the process of learning the protocol. And then there are times when that's not the case. There are times when people's own trauma will really impede them and get in the way. That's not something that we can necessarily screen for. We can't really know that at the outset. When someone signs up for a training, we don't know who they are, obviously. So when they show up for the weekend, when you are just saying hello and meeting someone, you don't necessarily know where they are in that scale. So what we do with that is the process from when you first begin, when you first show up at our core level training, the beginning, Each of our trainings is a weekend long. We only have 3 levels, and the first 2 are the only ones required to be certified in the work. The third level is kind of a extra if you want to keep going.
Mm.
When someone shows up, if they decide that they want to work the program, they want to get certified, it involves practice hours of doing the work. Those practice hours are closely supervised, and our supervisors walk each person through their work, looking for helping them notice where they might have missed an idea or been off track, misunderstanding something, that sort of thing. So through that supervision process, when somebody is in a place where they aren't able, based on their own level of healing, that becomes apparent through that process. That's pretty much how we discover that.
Oh, yeah. And then at that point, you would be honest with them or you would have a
Yeah,
conversation with them. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So someone goes through training, they come to core or advanced or masters. You can go at them at different pace. Some people take years to go through those 3. And sometimes at masters, you meet someone, they're like, oh, yeah, I've done these all back to back. And you're like, wow, good job.
I know there are people who will do the whole thing in 6 months,
Yeah.
who are like,
All
I'm
in.
doing this. I am on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Which in some ways might be easier because I also have known people who they go to core and then they're like, I'm going to go home and do my 30 practice hours. But they take maybe 6 months to do those 30 hours. And it's like you almost lose momentum.
Mm, maybe. It depends on the person. Another person might really need a lot of time to soak all those ideas in. There are people who come to core and during their 30 practice hours, they'll come and refresh 2 other cores over a year's time, let's say, and really get it into their head,
Oh,
and
yeah.
sometimes that's what a person needs.
Huh. Yeah.
We really encourage refreshing people. We make it real cheap to come and everything to refresh. We really want it to be an easy, normal part of our culture that people come back and refresh a training they've already gone through, because it really, every single time a person does that, even seasoned practitioners, when they come and refresh a level, they always say, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe how many other little bits I got out of this that I didn't hear the first time, or it was too much to take it all in, or hey, you said it differently this time than you did when I took it 5 years ago, and it really made sense in a new way." People get a lot out of refreshing.
Yeah, I love that. What's something, okay, this is going to be different for everybody I know, but in general, as a whole, what's something that you wish every new practitioner knew early on? Like if you could just infuse that in them, that probably typically takes you just got to do this for years and eventually you kind of figure it out. But is there something that comes to mind?
Hmm.
Like, I'm wondering if you see new practitioners, and you're just like, this is something they're probably not going to be able to comprehend yet, but give them a year, give them 2 years, and they're going to really understand.
I wish I could. There's several things I wish I could impart what we were talking about a minute ago, the surrender piece. I wish. So there's this dynamic tension. That's one of my pet phrases, right? That's what Upper Dogs is all about. There
Yeah.
there's a dynamic tension between being directive as a practitioner, being authoritative, coming with confidence, leading a session, as far as the experience of the of the client. There's a tension between that and the surrendered following of the actual steps. Where do we go in the steps? And
Hmm.
that tension. What we see a lot in the supervision process in new practitioners is that nearly everyone in the beginning will err on one side or the other. So new practitioners are either overly controlling in the session, where they're letting their logic lead far much more than they should. And for instance, let's say when an emotion tests, instead of having the client hold the emotion and experience what they experience, they will tell the client what they should be feeling with that, or like for instance, they'll get down to the vow and lie in core practice, and they will go with their logic, and even when the client doesn't resonate with it, they'll just sort of
Mm,
bulldoze over, right? So
yeah.
you've got people on that side, and then you've got people on the other side who are overly tentative and who are so worried about messing it up or missing a step or doing it wrong, that they go through the work really sheepish. For instance, every single emotion that comes up there, they are expecting the client to come up with a whole new story. There's no direction at all. So that if I could impart that a good productive healthy balance between the authoritative element you need as a practitioner and the willingness to fully surrender to the lead of the spirit as well, that is something that only really comes, I think, over time, like you said. So if I could impart it, like, boy, if we could bottle that up, I would bottle that up for everybody right at the beginning.
That would be really helpful.
Yeah.
I just remember my first session or two. It just like looking back on it, it was just so clunky because every single piece I had to look up. Okay, what do I do next?
Mm,
And there was no relying on my intuition or my hearing from the, it was just like so rigid and protocol. And then the person I was working on, my friend Sarah, she like got amazing breakthrough and I was shocked. I was like, what? I don't
I
even know what
know.
I'm doing yet. And it still worked.
Oh my goodness, Laura, I cannot tell you how many times we hear that story that some new practitioner will say, I did a session and it was a total mess. And I didn't know what I was lost. I was messed up. I had looked at my book 40 million times. And the person is completely free of their issue. Like they
So
all the
awesome.
time. And that makes me laugh. That reminds me of, have you ever heard the term Bible roulette?
No.
No. So my background is Church of Christ, and that's a term I heard a lot growing up, Bible roulette. And what people mean by that is a person would go to the Lord in some distress or asking for direction or a question or whatever, and they would look for the answer from the Lord by just sort of flipping randomly open to any page in the Bible and pointing your finger down and then whatever you happen to land on, right? That kind of thing. That's
Okay.
what we call Bible roulette. Well, Bible roulette is one of those things where when you're a brand new Christian, you can get away with that kind of thing for a while. Like he'll he'll meet you in that kind of sort of silliness and oh, I don't know. There's a that's not a very disciplined, very responsible approach, right? And he'll
Gotcha.
he'll meet you in that for a while when you're a young, but he does expect you to grow out of that kind of thing. You know,
Hmm.
a person who has walked with Jesus their whole life um, generally can't get away with Bible roulette. And it's kind of like that with this when someone comes to learn this and the spirit of the Lord really has big plans and wants them doing this, like they are in line with the lead of the Lord in their life, there's really blessing for them in doing this work. He will do that. He will give big beautiful, he definitely did that to me for no, oh, there's no doubt. He gave me massive fruit with clients when I was just
Fumbling.
throwing rocks at a screen. I was like, well, does that do anything? Like, I mean, back in the early days, I had no idea what I was doing. And he kept giving me these beautiful, miraculous fruit. And what he was doing was it was his way of saying, keep coming this way, keep coming this way. These are the questions I want you asking. These are the steps I want you taking. These are the risks I want you taking. Like, keep coming this way, right? And he does that to practitioners all the time. It's so much fun to watch.
It is so much fun. Yeah, and it takes the pressure off. It's like just yet again, we are not the healer. It is
Yep.
just the Holy Spirit. And as if we're showing up and we're like, okay, Lord, I have no idea. This is literally my first session. And he's like, it's all right. I got you. I'm the healer anyway.
Yep.
Okay, so speaking of stories, what are some of the most like compelling or memorable stories of people being set free from this tool, this modality? Especially my favorite things to hear of are like physical healing, because the concept of a physical symptom being rooted in emotional pain was so shocking to me as a nurse. When I got trained in this, I was like, wait, there's no way that a chronic illness could be caused by emotional trauma. That was so amazing for me to learn.
Okay. So let's see. A favorite in chronic illness would be fibromyalgia. That would be a favorite. Both it's Heather's story. It's a favorite of both of ours. Heather, who runs the institute with me, she's in charge of the supervision process. She had a new husband and wife who came to church. They met them, asked them to lunch. At lunch, the wife was describing how she's really suffering in fibromyalgia. She had been for some years at that point and was in enough pain by then that she was unable to dress herself anymore. So her
Oh, wow.
teenage daughter was having to dress her. And so Heather felt like the Lord was saying to her while she's hearing the story that he wanted to use her to heal this for this woman. He wanted her to offer Splankna, so she did. So I think it was 3 sessions. And
Okay.
in 3 sessions time, what it turned out to be on a subconscious level for this particular person, it isn't the same for everyone. So if you're listening and you have fibromyalgia, don't think I am diagnosing you. I am not. One person's fibromyalgia can be built in one way and another's in another way. Like I was saying earlier, every one of us has our own unique story. But for her, it was on a subconscious level, the enemy had convinced her that if she took on this symptom, this fibromyalgia, it would be a way to get some compassion and some care, some gentleness, some attention, like some TLC,
Sure.
particularly from a husband who was not that way. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, 3 sessions, her pain lifted, and it's now been, I don't know how, it's been probably 15 years that she's pain free.
Wow. Yeah, the subconscious is so powerful. That is
Oh
also a
yeah.
thing I've learned. It's like it's so powerful that it could convince your entire body that more than being pain-free, what you need is tender, loving care. And a way to get tender, loving care is by having a chronic illness. And then people will feel bad for you and give you attention
Hmm.
and take care of you.
Hmm. And
Um,
there are a million examples like that.
yeah,
Clinical depression is another one where the enemy can convince a person on a subconscious level that if you are depressed, it will be worth it because it gets you out of life's responsibilities. Nobody will expect anything from you. There won't be big pressures. You're pretty much off the hook if you have depression because it's sort of like your excuse. It's your get out of jail free card. You know,
oh, yeah,
that's an example. Now, again, I'm not at all saying that that is what is behind depression in general or for
all the
everyone.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, no. One person's depression is built one way, another one another way.
Yeah, but it's this idea of like it could be because you were convinced on some level that it was going to be a benefit to you in some way.
Right, right. Which is not conscious to the person,
Right.
almost ever. And yet that kind of frame and acknowledging that, bringing that in your good old fashioned confession and repentance and breaking agreement with it, if that actually is a root behind it, will be the thing that helps it lift. So it's a now again, to be clear, there is also fibromyalgia or clinical depression that are physical alone. That does happen. There are different reasons. I see the longer I do this, the less common I think that is. But I still do think there is such a thing as just a physical that doesn't have subconscious root. For
Right.
instance, if someone came in and said, my father is an example. My father has both of his knees have been replaced. He had several injuries when he was young in playing baseball, and that's not, as far as we can tell, as far as there's any evidence, there's not a subconscious root to that per se. He just busted up a knee enough times that it was like, I'm done. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah, I'm thinking of one of my big breakthroughs that I had with a client that I was like working on a physical symptom that really opened my eyes to this was this person who had severe and chronic migraines. They were
hmm.
hospitalized for them.
Hmm.
And we did, I think it was our third or fourth session where it was like, little tiny, we were working towards layers the first session, 2 sessions. But that third or fourth session, we got on something that was very similar to what you said about getting tender, loving care. It was like when they were a child, the only time they got compassion from their adult, from their parent, was when they were sick. And so there was this understanding that, hey, if I want attention, if I want someone to show me that they love me, I have to be sick. And
Hmm.
so there's this subconscious agreement with migraines to be sick.
Hmm.
And so we broke that off, and this person drastically decreased their migraine medicine, their PRN migraine medicine. It was a big breakthrough kind of session.
Yeah.
And yet her migraines continued to some degree, not nearly as frequently, not nearly as intense, but they did continue. And so we kept doing sessions. Well, eventually we found out that there was some structural stuff happening in
Oh,
her neck, which was causing, the continuation. So that was really what taught me, like, okay, so part of the migraines really were emotionally, spiritually, subconsciously rooted, and part of them really were just physiological.
yeah. And that's a great example. That happens all the time. When someone
Mhm.
comes in with a physical symptom and they say, "Can Splankna help my blank?" Whether that's my high blood pressure or my diabetes, or the answer is Splankna can help to the degree that it's emotionally rooted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it might be slightly emotionally rooted, it might be entirely, and might be not at all. I think I shared on the previous podcast, or maybe the one before that, about the woman whose vision was impaired from the rafting accident. Had a client who came who a couple years before had been in a rafting accident where she cracked her skull underwater and had
Oh,
really was a very severe accident. She had had all kinds of uh, painstaking, long PT and recovery, and by
wow.
the time she came into my office, she came because the only thing that hadn't really restored for her was her vision. She could see all right to live and work, but she couldn't read. If she tried to read, she would get super dizzy and nauseous and get a migraine. And she kept telling the doctors, "I can't read." And they kept saying, "There's nothing wrong with your eyes." So they would do all the different scans they could do, everything they could find, and said, "Your eyes are perfect." And so she came to me. Well, when she described all that to me, I said, "So unfortunately, that sounds like it's probably not in my purview. That's probably physical. But I'm more than willing to ask the Lord, if He wants to use Splankna, use me to assist this in any way." So we went and asked and did what we did. And he took her to the moment of the trauma under the water, and this is in Splankna. This is we call this an assault agreement, where the enemy takes advantage of a trauma moment by showing up and saying, "This really, really big bad thing is going to happen. But if you agree to this smaller degree, we'll let the big thing go." That's a very common thing that the enemy likes to do in our lives. And so it was one of those. They had shown up to her under the water there and said, "You're going to die. But if you give us rights just to your, in this case, it was vision, we'll let you live." Now, of course, they're not in charge. They don't have the right to do any of that. It's all just a big trick. It's all that they have ever since the cross. But it was enough, apparently, to convince her on some sort of a subconscious level. And so we broke that. And before she went to bed that night, she could read with no issue at all.
Oh, wow.
I
That's
know, right?
amazing.
And that's
That's
an
cool.
example where I'm like, I didn't expect to be useful to that at all. And yet, look, there it went.
Yeah, it's like, why not? You might as well try.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't know if it's emotionally rooted or physiologically rooted, what's the harm in just doing a session and seeing what happens?
Right. And then there are other things where, yes, you can look at that and see that it's physical, but clearly it's got to be emotional. My favorite story around that was a infant. She was pre-verbal. I don't know if she was walking, she was crawling, but she was pulling all of her hair out and banging her head on the floor. And the parents obviously were super distraught. And she was, I think, their third, and their other two hadn't had any similar issues. And so, you know, that's an example of talk about powerless. I can't even, none of us, we can't even ask her, "Why are you so upset?" you know Why are you ripping
Yeah.
the hair out of your head and banging your head on the floor? Like, what is, you know, and so all any of us can do is just go to the Lord and cry out for help and say, you know, Lord God, what is going on in her little heart? Like, why is she doing this? Because there's no physical reason why a little would do that, you know?
Hmm.
And he took us to some trauma that she had in the womb. There had been a twin initially that had not survived, and she was convinced that it was her fault. She blamed herself. The enemy convinced her she needed to self-punish, and so that's what she was doing. She was
Oh, wow.
punishing herself. She was taking it out on herself. And for her, in one session, one sitting, those emotions cleared. We broke that on her behalf, and she never pulled her hair out or banged her head again.
Oh my gosh. As a mom, that just like makes your heart so grateful
Oh, I can't
because,
even imagine.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's to watch your tiny little girl punishing herself, suffering.
Yeah.
That's
Hmm.
so interesting because just a few interviews ago, I had a practitioner come on here. And that was part of her story is her daughter was banging her head on the
Hmm.
wall and on the floor. And it's like, there is something to that. That's like
Hmm.
the second time I've heard someone talk about that pretty recently.
Yeah.
Okay, last question I have for you, and I could just go on and on. But how do you handle as a practitioner someone who can't tap into emotion because they've practiced their whole life shoving emotion or disassociating from emotion, or they just don't really want to? They can't tolerate a negative emotion because, for Splankna, those 10 seconds that they need to tap into loneliness or abandonment or rejection or whatever it
Hmm.
is, how do you handle it when they just don't have that ability or don't want to participate in that?
Yeah. Well, on the don't want to side, there's always going to be a percentage of folks who just won't. And that isn't about Splankna. We we get to say no to life in any form we want to. And so I can't make a person obviously do their work. I can't make them choose life, no matter what my method is. I mean, the Lord God Himself won't make us. And
True.
so that there are times when if a person won't, they just won't, and that's the end of that story for now. And the most you can do is intercede. That would be worst case scenario, right?
What do you say to
Uh,
that person when they're sitting in front of you and they're here for a session and you realize, like, oh, they're really not going to participate in this?
Well, I don't come across that. I think partially because I'm directive, right? I
Mm.
don't I don't allow a lot of, oh, I can't demand, like, come on, yeah, you can, let's go. Like I'm
Okay.
I'm pretty directive. So I don't give a lot of space for that, first of all. And also, if somebody's going to be in my office specifically, they know what they're there for. I mean, I'm being the founder and the developer of this. No one's hardly ever accidentally walked into my
Sure.
office. So I wouldn't have that as much as most practitioners would. I do have occasionally a person who has trouble with a particular emotion, like I can't feel that.
Okay.
And in those cases, it depends. If it's a negative that they feel like they can't connect to or won't connect to, I have some options. I might just verbalize, just talk for a minute about that, and just be compassionate and listen through how and why that emotion is difficult to connect to, and just that kind of moment of hearing them and offering compassion to the difficulty. It can be enough to get them to go ahead and take a risk, feel it just for a second. I will also say that sort of thing. I'll say, okay, now remember this. I know that it feels like one of the universal things about negative emotions that we repress, the perception that we have is that if we let ourselves feel it, it will take over like a tsunami and I'll never feel anything else again.
Mm.
That's a really common sensation in the human soul, but it isn't real. It isn't true. Emotions actually only swell for a few seconds at a time. And in the Splankna method, they only swell for those few seconds that one time. Because when you're connecting that emotional intention with the acupuncture system, with the touch, it goes ahead and releases. And so I just remind a person that I know it feels like it's going to take you over and overwhelm you. You'll drown in it, but that actually isn't true. It'll just swell for a little moment. I'll use my hand to make that little motion in front of them, like a little swell of a wave,
Yep.
that will sometimes be enough to help a person trust me and take a risk, move forward. If they're really, really stuck, you always have the option of surrogacy. So I can hold their acupuncture points for them. I can lend intention of imagining for them feeling that emotion. That might be enough to help them to be able to engage. So there are a couple different options,
Yeah.
but I tend to default to not letting a person get away with, I can't feel that.
When I'm sitting with someone and I'm having them hold an emotion, I'm always holding the emotion with them. That's just kind of like what I've gotten into. Is that what I'm supposed to be doing? Is that like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know
So
how else to say that, but I
yeah.
always am like empathizing with them. I'm imagining them being 4 and feeling the same emotion at the same
Yeah.
time that they are.
Yeah. Okay. So that's an interesting question. So that's a little bit of a practitioner weeds question here for our listeners, but it's not a requirement. It's certainly useful that there's a little bit of style and temperament and personality and gifting from the practitioner side that comes into that kind of a question. Because for me, I can tell you, doing Splankna well requires a depth and an intensity of presence and emotional connection from the practitioner that feels pretty unique to me. And and so part of that really, really thorough present connection usually does involve I'm pretty much doing what you said. I'm whether I'm holding the point specifically the whole time or not, I'm still staying very present with the emotion we're on and the context of it. They're them feeling that their age and everything. That's part of what it's like for the practitioner to be listening through and moving with that surrender. As a practitioner, to do this work well is sort of like riding a wave. It's like surfing a little bit, where there's a whole lot of skill, but you're still not in control of the wave.
Hmm.
And so it's again back to that whole tension, right, between authority and direction and surrender and follow. It's a very nuanced, personal, deep, quiet kind of a thing to do. It really takes a personality type. Anybody who listened to the training and could logically understand, I think, what the steps are and why they make sense. But logically understanding it and doing it well are very different processes.
Right. Yeah. All right. I'm going to have to wrap it up there. So good. It's so, I don't know what the word is, satisfying, fulfilling to be able to just dig into the things that I just sit and wonder about sometimes. And I don't just have the creator of Splankna on the other line to be able to ask these things to.
Well, and just so
So
you know, it's fun for me on a podcast interview like this. It's fun for me to not know what the next question is going to be and to be challenged by the answer. I actually enjoy that quite a bit more than the podcast where they're all scripted and they've sent you all the questions ahead of time and they want you to be all ready for the answer. I
yeah,
really enjoy I enjoy the spontaneity and the challenge of I don't know what you're going to ask me next and what I should say to it. I think that's more fun.
I think it's more fun too. Plus, I've got 5 kids. The planning an entire 45 minutes of questions in advance, I'd rather roll with it. I'd rather just
Well,
jump in, record it, let it be organic. So,
so if you've got a longer list, feel free to take another round, pick
yeah,
up where we left off.
yeah, I might have to do that. I want to end this with a reminder. This is something we touch on here, but if you haven't heard it in a while, okay, splankna.com. You can go to the website. If you are wondering if becoming a practitioner is a good idea for you or something that the Lord's calling you to, there's information on the next trainings. If you're listening to this in real time, the next one is coming up in October. 3 different locations. There is 2 books that Sarah And then Heather, who she was mentioning, they wrote, one of them is called Upper Dogs, and it's all about our spiritual authority. We are not the underdogs. We are on the winning team. That is a super powerful and reality shifting, mindset shifting book. And then just a book called Splankna that explains and goes into depth about all the topics we just kind of brushed on today. And then lastly, on that website, you can also find information about a practitioner in your area. And if there's not one in your area, you can look for a practitioner who is listening prayer certified, which just means they can do virtual appointments. And you can contact them, you can read a little bio about them, and get started on your own sessions. So that's it. We'll see you next week, and thanks for being here.
Thank you too.